Warm welcome also from my side. It's especially a pleasure for me because it's my hometown here in Vienna, and I'm Christoph Schmiedinger, and I'm working for a small boutique consulting company with a strong focus on supporting organizations in adopting agility. And when we think about let's say supporting organizations in, for example, helping teams, helping departments, helping business units, or even whole organizations, then especially when thinking about business units and whole organizations, it's very closely linked to actually the point, do we use agile methods, do we use agile also outside the product development? Yeah? So, and that gets more and more common if we talk about the big transformations that are ongoing in the enterprises area. And that's why I did this talk. It's basically based on my experience in this field. And I call it, I take you with me through a kind of safari through a quite unknown terrain, because there is not that much published yet. We do have a lot of case studies for Agile in product development, for Scrum in product development, but here I want to give you a kind of overview what I experienced. And when thinking about organizations that become agile, typically there is some kind of maturity, no matter which model, but there is a maturity. At first, organizations often start in this kind of awareness. Yeah? We get to know agile, we think about where can agile help in, let's say, meeting our objectives, our business objectives more efficiently or more effectively. If the hypothesis is yes, then typically the next phase is to start something, yeah, to pilot something. And this is typically done in the IT context, in the software context. And if these early learnings are gained and let's say we do have some kind of success, then the next discussion is about what about scaling agile. And scaling agile is also not in every case related to scaling it in the product development context, but it's actually mainly done there. So at some point in time, the scaling agile will hit some kind of ceiling. Yeah? So you hit the ceiling and you have to decide if you jump the chasm or not in order to get to end-to-end business agility. And I don't want to talk about especially this jump because it's about actually kicking off a major transformation project. But what is interesting is that for this stage here, then it's very common also to think about what do we do with teams that are not linked to product development. What do we do with them? Which methods do we use there? And as organizations tend more and more towards this right-hand side, it's getting more and more common. So we have to come up with solutions. What actually do we do there? And when we divide the organization, and I know this is quite a simplistic view, yeah? We do know a lot about, let's say, in the delivery, all this kind of product development or let's say further development of ongoing products that are already launched. There are a lot of case studies. You can use their iterative agile methods like Scrum. But we do have also other parts in the organization. Typically we have a sales unit, a service unit that are both very customer-centric and dealing with the customer, let's say, from the first point of contact until, let's say, the lifetime of this customer ends. And we do have also the support units, for example, HR, legal, all these kind of units that are supporting the organization in order to deliver or service the customer more efficiently and efficiently. And for these other units, we recommend, let's say, to use agile methods. Yeah? There is no one-fits-all approach. We don't have a blueprint where we can say, oh, use just Kanban. Yeah? Kanban is not the solution for everything in this field. And that's why we recommend try to adopt some of the agile methods, for example, task force, dailies, or whatever. And the more important thing is actually that the whole organizations as a system adopts or gets a common understanding of all these agile values and principles, and that the organization is striving towards a more modern way of working actually. And what we actually do when we get in touch with new teams is we try to, no matter in which context they operate, we try to we try to learn them what is agility all about, yeah? And we quite often use this kind of metaphor for a tree, yeah? Where we can say, okay, we have the roots are actually the values, yeah? And then based on these roots you have the trunk, which are the principles, yeah? So fast feedback and everything like that. And on the tree top we have first the frameworks, might be Scrum or Kanban, and above the frameworks you have a lot of practices, yeah, that has developed over the couple of years. And why do we use this kind of metaphor of a tree? Because it's the same for both, yeah. So you can only, let's say, only leaves and fruits are only growing if the trunk or the roots are healthy. Yeah? And actually it's the same for agility. Yeah? If you treat the values and the principles, if you treat them not properly, yeah, then you won't reap the benefits up there. Yeah? So basically it's more than like a cargo cult in order to, yeah, we use a Kanban board, but actually it has no impact for the business. Yeah? So it's about values and principles. So when we do come to a new team, for example a legal team that is not a product development context, then we say you have to achieve somehow in your working model those values and principles. For example, if you can't, if you are not able to do a regular sprint review, then what can be done in order to get fast feedback? Yeah? I mean, sprint review is only one practice in order to get fast feedback. There are dozens. Yeah? And so the discussion should not be, oh, we can't do it, we skip it. Yeah? This discussion should be more like, we can't do this specifically, but let's figure out how we can fulfill the principles and values by enhancing our model in a different way in order to get this fast feedback for our team. So, but let's say enough for this theory at that time. We want now dive into a couple of examples. Actually, I have 5, and the very first one is the actually IT operations team within a large German bank. And we did there several Kanban trainings, and we also helped the teams in finding their unique Kanban board or their unique task board in order to measure lead time, in order to measure throughput. And what we identified in many of those teams is that they have a bunch of different tasks, yeah, or fields of action. And we said, okay, let's use swim lanes. Yeah? Let's use swim lanes and acknowledge that there are different tasks. And these different fields of tasks, they have different, let's say, stages or workflow steps in order to get tasks from to-do until done. Yeah? And actually that's what it's all about. Yeah? Kanban is a lot about visualizing the let's say, the workflow, where the tasks are going and all kind of stuff. What we also did is to put there at the top the fast lane in order to acknowledge, yes, there might be some tasks that have to be handled immediately, and that tasks are going directly to this lane. And over a couple of weeks or even months, actually, many of the teams were able to measure actually throughput and lead times for every of these different fields of actions. And it helped them a lot in let's say, in first figuring out if they meet their service level agreements, and if not, it helped them to get an idea on what to improve in order to meet those service level agreements. So while this example is, let's say, quite close to product delivery because it's operations, and if you're talking about DevOps, it's quite close. But let's move to the next example, because that's actually an example really from a, let's say, support area. It was at the financial service provider, it was the legal department, and actually their main problem was that the colleagues that were working in this department, they were very specialized, and they were not working too much together actually. And therefore we decided we do actually quite simple task board. Again, we tried to split up the different kind of expertises. So we had capital market law, we had labor law, and we used quite simple columns, let's say the typical columns. We included a weighting column. It's very important for them in order to track how many items are waiting. Yeah? Imagine lawyers, yeah? They prepare proposals, they prepare contracts, they send it even for external external entities or the file for a lawsuit, there are lead times of weeks or months. Yeah? So this actually, it's probably not the best visualization here because it was very crowded actually, the waiting column. But it gives you a hint what the team is actually doing. And what we also did is was introducing a kind of daily. It was also 15 minutes. It was in the morning in order to start the business day and to get an insight on which colleague is working on what. And we encourage them a lot in, yeah, come on, pick a task or an item here in a pair of two. Yeah? Just work together, yeah? Share knowledge. It's basically it's important to do so in order to avoid this kind of bottlenecks where one colleague has the whole knowledge and when he is or she is on vacation then nothing works. What we also did there was we experimented with some kind of mob working, so in a group of 3 or even 4 colleagues that we did very basic stuff actually. We did basic stuff where we thought this basic stuff should be handled by every colleague. Yeah? For example, NDAs, articles of association, so very quite, let's say, legal basic stuff that was important to do that for every colleague. And what we could achieve or let's say after a couple of, I think it took them almost a few months to get common to this working model. And what our, let's say, our achievement there was we lowered a lot the barrier in order to grab something that you are not familiar with. Yeah? So they really now are not that afraid anymore in order to grab something that might be not your expertise. For example, I grab something from the capital market law, although it's not my expertise. Yeah? And that doesn't mean that they do not do reviews in order to check if everything is working in the manner we expect. And that helped them a lot. When thinking about, this is a very operative task board, and I have my third example is, let's say, completely on the opposite side. It's a very strategic example. It's again from a bank. It's a risk management department. Actually, it's not a department. It's a whole division. It was more than 100 employees in this division, and they did some let's say basic and strategic risk management tasks. And what their main problem was not that much in the operations. Their main problem was that the management team always spends too much time on the operational day-to-day basic stuff. So and this impeded them to talk about the really important things, the strategic, innovative objectives. For example, they had a lot of initiatives to automate, for example, operations, to automate credit assessments, to automate real estate evaluations. And it was a kind of deadlock, yeah? Because they had so much to do in operations that then they were not talking about these kind of initiatives that were targeted to improve operations, and because they were not talking about it, they were slowly progressing, and then again, the amount of work in the operations doesn't decrease at all. So we had actually to break out this vicious cycle, and what we did, we set up a quite strategic task board, and it was basically for the director and her direct reports, and they had a sure fix every week for 1 hour. And in order to shift the focus from the operational stuff to the more innovative stuff, we said, okay, let's get the insight to the run, to the operations business. Let's get that insight just by having a dashboard. Yeah? Do not talk about, we don't want to talk about every single task. It's more like micromanaging. So we just set up KPIs in order to get an idea, is day-to-day operations working or not? Yeah? And it helped them to talk only about operations if it's really necessary. Yeah? For example, if everything is green, there is no need to talk about operations. Yeah? You just talk about operations if there are, for example, some kind of risks that has to be addressed. And that helped them actually a lot in shifting towards the left-hand side, where they had their division objectives, where they had their initiatives, their projects in order to do this kind of improvements and do this kind of innovation. And we use their roadmaps, and I don't think it's especially important if you use here roadmaps or if you use here more, let's say, the Kanban approach with columns. It was actually the main target was to shift the focus. And what helped, or or what was really nice to see is that they were a lot more engaged in this shoe fix, because they were not talking about this annoying stuff that is day-to-day operations that has to be done anyway, but they were more enthusiastic about, yeah, we can now talk also about innovative stuff. We can also about, let's say, ambitions we have and we want to achieve in order to improve operations. So this might be a good example where you can have also on a more strategic level and board that, let's say, gives a management team a direction on where to focus. Yeah, it's all about focus, where the energy flows, there actually the things are happening. Another more strategic approach I would like to introduce, and actually we did that for a bank, and we are now trying to implement it also for another company, and basically I mixed it, because each of them has a slightly different approach, but it's about actually portfolio management, getting more agile in a portfolio management exercise, and it's basically the idea, okay, we have to plan the next year, we have to plan probably next quarter, depending on what kind of issue the company has. And what we did there, first we did some kind of portfolio planning, and we included a lot of people from the business units, also from IT, and we were talking about what are the ongoing initiatives, what were the things that aren't, let's say, finished yet, and they are still highly prioritized for next year. And then we got an idea how many resources already are blocked, actually. And then we talked about the new initiatives, and we did some kind of presentation where they had to present what's the MVP, how much budget do I need for that, what is the return of invest approximately, what's the contribution actually to the company goals. And when we had all those things, we were also figuring out, okay, where are some risks? Are there some dependencies between this red one and this green one? And we actually tried to facilitate this process also to have some kind of board where we can see, okay, this risk, this issue is addressed. It's probably not resolved, but someone is responsible for doing so. And after we got all these details, we had, let's say, the discussion about what to prioritize. And this was, of course, this discussion, and at the very end, probably nobody was happy 100%. It's more a consensus. And the next step actually was to think about where we have to cap actually. So because at some point in time we have too many initiatives that were ongoing. It's about avoiding losing focus. If you have an organization that runs too many projects, there's always the risk that there is a lot of inefficient task switching handover, and that's why we have to somehow say, okay, for the first quarter we have these two initiatives, we want to start 1, 2, 3 more, but then we have to cut, otherwise there is a lot of task switching because the same people are involved in participating in more of the initiatives. So actually this was the first step, and then we had, let's say, a plan what the teams actually have to deliver in the next quarter. So I do emphasize to put a strong focus on just the next quarter in order to do it also more agile. It doesn't make sense to plan today for what we do in October 2020. And the next step was then that the teams got to know what kind of initiatives they have to work on, and then they had, then we had the idea of creating an artifact, and it's actually it's kind of an OBIA. It was used by Toyota. It's quite an old concept. Also the ING group uses that a lot. The idea is on the left-hand side there is a performance wall where you have a lot of KPIs in order to always discuss in such meetings. Do we reach our KPIs, and what we can improve in order to reach those objectives and targets? So you have a performance wall which basically tells you how is the organization performing at the current state. And then you have the portfolio wall where all the teams, and we call it here initiatives because we had agile teams, we had also a lot of classical project teams, where they plan actually their deliveries. And we said just use some kind of not user stories, just on a broad example, on a broad level. And when we had this initial, and this was done, let's say, once per quarter, and then we used this artifact in order to every second week, because the iterations have been 2 weeks for this company, then every second week, so bi-weekly, we did some kind of synchronization with all the product owners, with all the project managers, and say, okay, which of them got actually delivered, so we can do a check on them. Which of them have an impediment, which of them are delayed, what are the consequences of these delays, are there some kind of interdependencies between those initiatives. And what was also important is that senior management is attending this meeting in order to resolve those impediments. It's about grabbing this impediment and saying, okay, I'm responsible, I will do so, I'm in charge of actually resolving this impediment, because that's actually what is this meeting all about. It's about handling priorities and getting things done in order by resolving impediments. And what actually helped this organization is to get an overview of what was happening. We did this per division in the bank, and it was actually helping them a lot in having an overview what was going on and in actually what are we delivering. So we really had a strong focus on that. Those items here are really go-live items, let's say, on items that have really an impact also on customers. And this gave them a good overview, and the discussion about the impediments actually improved the process. So this is more, let's say, more portfolio management. Let's say when we talk about, probably you're familiar with the flight level concept, while this is flight level 3, so actually the strategic stuff, this is more coordination stuff, so flight level 2. It is not the same actually, but it can be actually linked to these concepts as well. And below that you have the team task boards, of course, where each team plans their own deliveries. The very last example I would like to introduce is using Agile as a way of transforming your company, of changing your company. And there we use a lot this kind of transition teams or transformation teams in many organizations, it is also called. And the most important thing, I explained in a minute, the most important thing is first you have to discuss about why we want to do this change. There is the strong need of really thinking why do we do progress in such endeavor. And the second thing is you have to think about what's the scope of this change, and we typically work with a pyramid where we say it's about architecture, infrastructure, skills, client or customer centricity, management frameworks, and leadership and values. And these basic, or more or less basic, so scope and why, these are the inputs actually for the transition team, and that I will explain in the next slide. The transition team is actually a cross-functional team that represents, let's say, the system that has to be changed. For example, if we want to change the whole organization, so you find there participants from strategy, from senior management, from IT, from HR, probably experienced Scrum Master, experienced Agile coach, experienced product owner. And what they have to do is actually to deliver this change in an iterative way. You should be a role model if you are a transition team, and that's why you should also work in iterations, typically in 2-week iterations or 3-week iterations. And then you create a kind of backlog, which with all the items that are necessary in order to deliver actually the change. And again here, like with a real Scrum team that works probably more in product development, you have to focus on fast deliveries, on real examples, on real deliveries where you can get feedback. And so these kind of teams, they also do a lot kind of sprint reviews, where they present, let's say, their achievements to the stakeholders. And in an organizational transformation, the stakeholders are typically all of the employees. So they can give feedback actually what's happening there, and it's a more transparent way also of doing a transformation and change project. And let's say typically one of the first things the transition team does is to set up some kind of Scrum teams or some kind of Agile teams in order to pilot stuff. and in order to pilot stuff, and then they have to really be linked closely to them in order to identify what are they experiencing actually on the operating level. What kind of impediments do they have? Because if the impediments cannot be resolved here, they can be elevated to this transition team, and then they land in their backlog, and they have to think about how can we resolve that impediment on an organizational level. And to explain the third circle, it's about pilot groups, or sometimes they're also called focus groups. If an impediment is too huge to resolve it here, or if you need a different expertise, then you can create some kind of pilot groups where you create again a cross-functional team, but very specifically to the impediment that has to be resolved. For example, if you need new career path models, or another example from another company was the purchasing process for external software developers was very slow, and that was not meeting the demand. So that could be resolved in own dedicated work groups, and it's important that also these kind of work groups are delivering fast. It's not about procrastinating 3-4 months, so actually that they have to deliver. So the last slide for this example. What we also did for a lot of the teams is to create a kind of war room for them, where they have all the information, and it's again actually everything with Agile. You just try to visualize everything that is needed for getting a team working. So no specialty deals on that, but actually it is about visualization. And I think the good thing about delivering Agile in an Agile way, let's say, is that you get more transparency, that you involve more people, you get early feedback, and it's about speeding up the process. It's not about designing the organization 6 months and then do a big bang rollout. So when I have to conclude what are, let's say, the most important learnings from adopting Agile methods in a lot of fields outside the product development, the first thing I already mentioned, it's all about values and principles. As far as I see, there is no one-fits-all approach, like there is one method like Scrum that quite good fits to product development. There is no one-fits-all. You really have to tailor the methods and principles and values to the actually needs of the actual team. So it's about finding your unique way of working. The second thing I want to highlight, and it's also quite clear probably for an Agile mindset that human being, it's about inspect and adapt. So when I worked with a lot of the teams, we didn't get it right at the first time. So for some of the teams, we needed even months to find a suitable working model. And it also depends on how often do they see each other. If they do see each other only once a week, like in the strategic task board, you need months because you don't have that much iterations. If you meet probably every day, then it's more like weeks. But I think the most important message is don't expect a perfect solution the very first thing you do actually. And the last thing is, and I think it's important for the community also, because I do believe it's getting more and more important when we think about talking about the whole organization goes Agile, then we have to share best practices or good practices, let's say. We have to share what other teams have learned, don't make the same mistakes, and also try to learn from other teams, but also it's vice versa. You have to share also in order to leverage on that. Yeah, well, thank you, and I hope you got some insights for your teams that you support probably in outside the product development area. Thank you very much.